If you have a character or an object that is moving slowly in your scene and you want to make it go faster, what do? Decrease the timing or do you increase the spacing? This is one of the questions that I asked myself a lot when I was just starting out, and I know a lot of people do. So let's get this question out of the way once and for all. What's up everybody and welcome to my channel. In this video we're going to talk about definitions and confusions that arise around timing and spacing. Then I'm going to show you a little shot that I did just for this video to illustrate the subject. Then we're going to talk about how you approach timing and spacing in your workflow, and also about the nature of spacing, why it's so important to have beautiful spacing in your shots. And at the end we're going to summarize everything and also talk about the areas where spacing is often overlooked. And at the very end, if you are interested, I'm going to show the progression of the shot that I did for this video. So timing is time in frames that takes an object to move from point A to point B. Very simple. Spacing is how it moves from point A to point B, where is each pose on each frame. So while these two terms are essentially the qualities of movement and they are very connected to each other in terms of they both describe the speed of motion, they're very different in terms of how you should approach them. And that's a little bit tricky, especially at the beginning, because there is a lot of confusion in these two terms. So as we all know, when we are increasing spacing, we are making things go faster. But while making things go faster, we are also decreasing timing, right? So if my character is moving slowly, do I have to make my timing shorter or do I have to make my spacing bigger? Let me show you a little test that I did to illustrate this subject. So the best way to describe timing and spacing is of course the bouncing ball exercise. And what is especially important is to do like several bouncing balls in one shot, so you can see the effects of varying timing and spacing, and by that manipulate the weight of the ball and other characteristics of the balls. So this is very important. However, when we start to work on real life, on real world shots, the problem is we start to forget these simple principles. Let's see how varying timing and spacing can yield different results in the shot, in the real life shot. So let's take a look at this simple test that I did. So there are two actions in the shot, so there are two parts to this shot, and we'll go to them one by one, but the main point that I'm showcasing here is this action right here. So I'm doing this twice, for the first time and for the second time. So let's, and you can see how a different, varying timing and spacing makes a different feel to the action. So let's go back to the beginning first and see how timing and spacing feels at the beginning. So this is the start of the shot, and the character is pretty confident. You can read this from the pose itself, but you can also read this with the speed of him looking up. So you can look up like in a million different ways, right? If he was very quick here, it doesn't mean he's not confident. However, this speed right here, and especially in the contrast with what's happening next, is telling us that he is confident here. This action could also, it can be quicker, it can be slower. The nice thing about this is that it could be basically the same speed as this looking up. However, the nice thing about this is that there is contrast here. So it's more exciting to look at varying speeds. Next is the main example here. So look at this hand and this arm, at what this arm is doing here. So the action is the same. He's striking with his hand, with his right hand. If you look at the spacing, you know, there is different timing, of course, because this is a slower movement. and this is a quicker movement. However, if you look at the spacing, and let's go here frame by frame and just take a look at this arm. So this arm is traveling pretty fast here, and then it starts to stop really slow here. So you see how small the spacing here is compared to this spacing right here, from here to here. And then going to the next movement here, so pay attention to the spacing of this hand here. So from here to here it starts slow, then it gains speed. You see how big the spacing here is, and then it stops because the action is over basically. So let's look one more time. So by varying timing and spacing here in this example, I am varying what the character is basically doing and thinking here. So here the character is just aiming, and here the character is striking after the aim. And if you are interested in how this shot was animated, stick around to the end of this video, because I'm going to add a little progression reel of different stages like blocking, splining, polishing and stuff like that. So how do you approach timing and spacing in your workflow? We established that if you want to speed things up or slow things down, you manipulate timing, you change timing. Because timing is how much time does it take to move from point A to point B, while spacing is how it moves from point A to point B. Does it accelerate like this, or does it decelerate? This is very important. I would argue this acceleration and deceleration is more important than timing alone, because essentially when you are watching animation, when you are seeing animation on screen, what you see is solely described by spacing, where your character is on each frame of the shot. And it's very important to learn to understand spacing and to control spacing, because you can get timing right. You can shoot video reference, you can find reference, and you place your pose A on frame 1 and you place your pose B on frame 10, and yeah, here's your timing. You can play with it, speed it up, slow it down, but essentially what happens between those frames is what's going to make or break your animation. Because if you rely on the software to make spacing for you, if you rely on Maya to make your breakdowns, this won't work. Because what Maya does, or any animation software does, is mathematical approximation between pose A and pose B. And what you end up with is floaty, weightless, uneven and uninteresting spacing. And the reason for that is, where is spacing actually coming from? Why are we looking for uneven spacing? And the answer is very simple. It's the nature all around you. Newton's second law of motion is telling us that if a force is applied to an object, then this object will accelerate depending on its mass. So if we have a heavy object, it will be more difficult to accelerate it, and if we have a lighter object, it will be easier to accelerate it. So imagine you have a baseball ball and you are hitting this baseball ball with a baseball bat. And then imagine that you pick a golf ball or a tennis ball or a bowling ball, and then you hit it with the same bat, applying the same amount of force. Obviously, they will accelerate differently because they have different mass. So by showing acceleration, you are basically showing the weight of the object. And if you are not describing the weight correctly, you are making your animation look unnatural, and the audience will see that, they will feel that, And what it leads to is that the audience will disconnect from your characters. They will not believe the emotions that you are portraying. They will not empathize with your character. So spacing is acceleration. It's not speed, it's how the speed changes. You see how important it suddenly becomes, from tracking your spacing to talking about believing your characters, believing the performance. We established that even spacing is bad spacing and uneven spacing is good spacing, so we need to track it. What about spacing in rotations? If, for example, my hand is not moving, but it's rotating, what do? You apply the same principles in rotations. What about mouth shapes? For example, if you are doing lip sync for the character and you need the character to say wow. How do you say this? You can say this wow, or you can say this wow, or you can say this wow. The three different kinds of saying wow, and pose A and pose B, the ending and starting pose are the same, but what you do in between, the spacing of your shapes, is going to define how you are saying this wow. What about spacing in shapes? For example, if an object or a character that you are animating is changing shape throughout animation, or is, for example, it's moving towards the camera, for example, and rotating, changing the shape, it's the same principles that apply here. So you see how I talk a lot about spacing and not nearly enough about timing? That's because it's easier to get timing right. It's easier for us to understand timing, because since the moment that we are born, we start to look around us and to experience the world around us, to interact with nature, to interact with other human beings, with objects and things like that. So we are constantly learning, and we can tell when the timing is off. Even people who can't animate, who are not animators, have a very good sense of timing. They can look at your animation, they couldn't understand how you did it, but they can tell you if your character is moving too fast or way too slow. Let's talk a little bit about exaggeration. You can exaggerate spacing, you can make spacing tighter, you can make more difference in how fast the speed changes of your character or an object that you're animating. And when you exaggerate spacing in conjunction with exaggeration of timing, you can define the style of your animation. Of course, not do this in vacuum. You need to exaggerate your poses as well, you need to exaggerate emotions, you need to exaggerate like other principles like squash and stretch and things like that. But timing and spacing are very powerful tools in order to determine how your animation looks. So work on your spacing, my friends. This is really, really, really important. Study spacing, shoot video reference, scrub it frame by frame, see how spacing changes in, various actions and motions. So if you are just starting out, I hope this was helpful for you. If you're already a little bit more advanced in your animation, I hope this was a nice refresher. If you like this video, please hit the like button, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see videos like this, and hit that notification bell also. Thank you very much for watching. Happy animating. I'll see you in the next video.